Welcome everyone to the Colac-Otway Bushfire Forum. It's fantastic to see such great turnout. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gulidjan and Gadibanand peoples as the traditional custodians of these lands on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their ancestors and elders, past, present and emerging. So my name's Kirsten Diprose and it's lovely to be here. I live in southwest Victoria as well, near Karamat, and I actually came in from Warrnambool today, driving through that beautiful rain, which was so nice to see, something that we've all been holding out for. So why are we here today? It's a wonderful amalgamation of groups who share a concern is the reason that why we're here today, of locals and of national groups. We know bushfires are increasing in their intensity and frequency, and unfortunately we also know they'll continue to do so. Communities across Australia, including many in this region, have been directly impacted by bushfire. So this evening is all about getting together and asking each other, how should we respond to bushfires? How do our emergency responders make sure they can do the best in the case of a bushfire? How can our survivor voices be heard? And what should we be asking our federal government to do about bushfire and bushfire risk? Now, this is not an election event, I should say. It is fantastic to have some of our local candidates here, though, and we will get a chance to ask them directly about what they'll be standing for. But this is largely a community event, and we are very privileged to have some national leaders here as well. Greg Mullins and Cam Walker, who are leaders in the firefighting world and in climate action, and Jo Dodds, an advocate for bushfire survivors. Now, I know many in this room have had a direct experience of bushfires. For me, I've experienced it as a reporter. I remember the Black Saturday bushfires very well, the Black Summer bushfires in our recent memories, covering that as an emergency broadcaster. The devastation I remember very much after the Black Saturday bushfires and going multiple times to those communities. I suppose my first taste of it being close to me, though, was just on Boxing Day last year with the Grampians bushfire. I live just south of there, and our community wasn't directly impacted, but for a few hours there on Boxing Day morning, things weren't looking good, and I definitely felt that fear. And I spent the rest of the day doing the emergency broadcasting for the ABC, which made me feel useful, I have to say, at a time where you really realise that Mother Nature has a lot of power. Now, I'm really passionate as well about rural stories and getting communities together to make sure their voices are heard, and that's something that I do with my business. I started a podcasting company called Rural Podcasting Co. And so being here today is really meaningful for me in that sense. And I'd really like to make a special welcome to anyone here in the CFA and our SES members. Thank you for the work that you continue to do to protect our communities. Yes. Just some quick housekeeping. So there is food behind you, if you hadn't noticed, and that'll just stay out. So if you're starving, we'll let you sneak back. I promise I won't point you out. There's water as well over there. Toilets are just out the door and to your left. And a big thank you to Ratley's Bakery for the food. It's delightful. So thank you so much, Ratley's. Now, this format is very tightly timed. I've got about 30 seconds till I need to move on. We've got Jan, our timekeeper, who will be keeping our candidates on track. But we'll have two speakers, a panel discussion, and then our candidates for Wannon, who will introduce themselves and answer some questions. We've got Fiona McKenzie with us, Alex Dyson and Kate Gazzard. Right now, though, to really tell us about why this event is so important right here in the Colac-Otway region, I'd like to introduce Philippa Bailey from Climate Action Team Colac-Otway. A little bit about Philippa before she stands up and gives a 5-minute address. It's tightly timed. Philippa is a gardener and a musician who lives on the edge of the Otways. She used to be a social worker, retired in 2022, and has been stocking her pantry with homegrown produce since then. And she's been a member of the Climate Action Team since its inception in 2019. She's a bushwalker and concerned that the local region is under threat from climate change. And so she endeavours to play her part in climate action and adaptation. Please welcome Philippa Bailey.
Thank you, Kirsten. And just wanted to say good evening. I see lots of neighbours and community people I know, and it's fabulous to see you here today, and also welcome to people from outside the area and our eminent panel who've come down to share their expertise with us today. Just to start, I'd like to tell you a bit about the Climate Action Team. We meet every fortnight, and our mission is to highlight the urgency for action on climate change. So we've worked with the Colac-Otway Shire Council to help in the development of a climate change action plan. And we also lobbied for the transition of the gas heating at Blue Water swimming pool and sports centre, which probably a lot of you will use. That's going to be changed to electricity, and gas will be removed. They managed to acquire a grant for that, which is great, and I've matched the money, and it's been approved by council. So that will happen. So that's really great, because at the start we were a little bit, on the nose, the Climate Action Team, always making noise and whatever, but I think we've become much more mainstream, and people actually appreciate what we've been on about. And so we've run an energy efficiency scheme and urban greening projects, and now we're working on a cooling Colac, which will be encouraging residents to plant more trees and plant out their nature strips, so that we get good nature strips are shady and cool the town environment. And we're running climate cafes, spaces for people to talk about their concerns and fears as our world becomes hotter and drier. And we're supporting local land care network to run a series of carbon capture workshops for farmers. So, and our basic line, we advocate and encourage the transition to renewable energy. So anyway, in 2019, we heard Greg Mullins in the media talking of the bushfire risk in New South Wales and asking for government resources, and also that he was rejected. We've talked about this in our meetings, and we've felt very strongly that this should be heard by the people in government. And of course, the Black Summer followed with devastating consequences. And so we realised that this could happen in our region. And as people say, it's been a long time since we've had fires here, but it will happen again. So we did approach Greg to come, and that couldn't happen back then. But it's happening today, and we're absolutely thrilled to have Greg and the other emergency leaders here to share their knowledge with Colac and the Otway communities, because often we get a bit neglected. People go to Warrnambool, they go to Geelong, they go to Ballarat, but, they don't come to Colac. So we really appreciate that. And I heard Greg speak on a Climate Council media briefing in December that 2024 and 5 would be unpredictable with a great risk to southwest Victoria. So the first fire struck the Otways in mid-November. The emergency app directed me to leave 3 times, and neighbours that live up in a dense bush area told me they left home 10 times over the summer period. I have to say the fire response services and personnel were absolutely brilliant this summer and looked after us all. But, the risk is, if the weather gets hotter and more intense as predicted, how will we manage to stay safe with resources stretched? And I suppose some key things for us in this region is tourism. It's a big source of income. And of course, if we have too many fires, people will stay away, and businesses will collapse. And insurance is becoming really expensive for those of us that live here, and it's only going to go up as well. Because we've all seen how Garrowwood, the Grampians area, has been affected in recent times. So, all I want to say is, on behalf of the Climate Action Team, we need to stop the climate pollution causing this unstable and unpredictable weather. We must move to renewable energy and then gas and coal-fired electricity generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. So our next speaker, his name's already been dropped, about 3 or 4 times already, but we haven't said his name with the title AO next to it. I bet he loves it. I love doing that to people. Greg Mullins AO became a national figure in the 2019-20 bushfire crisis. From being a volunteer and career firefighter, he is an internationally recognised expert in responding to major bushfires and natural disasters. During his 39-year career, among many roles, he served as a Commissioner of Fire and Rescue New South Wales, President, Vice President and Board Chair of the Australasian Fire and Emergency Service Authorities Council, and New South Wales representative on the Australian Emergency Management Committee. In early 2019, he formed Emergency Leaders for Climate Action, a coalition of 34 former fire and emergency service chiefs from throughout Australia. And every time I rang him up when I was producing radio on Statewide Drive for a few years, he would always come on. So a big welcome to Greg Mullins.
I've got my timer. My time starts now. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. And I've never been to Colac before. And I was talking to Cam. I've been to Ballarat, but all I saw was smoke and fire when I went there last time. So that was near Beaufort. The fires near Beaufort last year. So look, what I want to give you a crash course in climate change and bushfires. And now, what have I got to do? Push the yeah. But before I do that, that's my slide. I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the lands that we're on tonight. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and just acknowledge that there was so much traditional cultural knowledge of fire prior to about 200 years ago, particularly where I live. There's no one left who it wasn't handed down because there was smallpox. There was all sorts of things happen, horrible things happen back then, but they're trying to get it back. So Indigenous people are working together across their boundaries and passing on that knowledge, and that will be part of the solution, I'm sure. Let's see if this works. Yes, a little bit about me. So I was 18 there. Have a look at the hair. I always knew when fires were bad because you could smell the hair burning. What's that smell? Uh-oh, I better get out of here. I had an afro. So I started fighting fires in 1971 with my dad, who was a volunteer firefighter. The fire shed was over the road. I was a volunteer firefighter from age 13, and when I left school, I went straight into the career fire service, 39 years there. I'm back at the same brigade where I used to fight fires with my dad. He fought fires until he was 82. So that's a little bit about me. I started to realise in the mid-1990s that something was wrong. And Dad used to tell me about the fire seasons. This will be a bad one, this won't be. He used to look at patterns. He used to look at different trees that would flower at different times of year, and he'd say, this year's going to be pretty bad. And it was always usually based on droughts in winter. And looking at Victoria, it's so dry. I was listening to Jason Heffernan, the Chief Officer of CFA, on the radio today talking about the fire restrictions. They might go into May, and that's pretty unprecedented, but it's not a good thing for the coming summer. So what are we looking at? Just the basis. It's if anyone tells you that people don't agree on the science of climate change, it's just rubbish. It was worked out 1859. A Scottish physicist called John Tyndall wrote papers. He actually stole it off a female physicist who, I can't remember her name because history gave it to the men, go figure. but she'd worked it out. He did further work. But by 1901, they were talking about the greenhouse effect. There was a physicist called Arrhenius, and he wrote a paper about it's going to be great because it's not going to be so cold, and but if we get more carbon dioxide. So it's settled science. But look, what that is, that's colder years, colder than average, then warmer than average, and the black line is CO2. So when the Industrial Revolution started, there were about 280 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. There's now about 428 or something parts per million. It's almost doubled. And if anyone tells you it's volcanoes, they know by the isotopic signature of the CO2 that it's from the burning of coal, oil and gas by human beings. So it basically forms a blanket. It traps sunlight and the heat, and there's other greenhouse gases. Methane is many times worse than CO2, but shorter lived. Water vapour, but it's warming up the planet. Now, bushfires, I studied bushfires from a kid, fascinated with bushfires, studied bushfires in France, Spain, Canada, the USA, did a 3-month study in 1995, I fought fires in California, and I had a pretty good grip on things. But 2003, you'd remember the Canberra bushfires, 485 homes burnt, 4 people lost their lives. Unprecedented, that word. It was the fastest moving bushfire in history in the world, 23 kilometres per hour. Never clocked a bushfire, a forest fire that fast before. Grass fires, yes. Forest fires, no. The first large fire tornado ever recorded in the world. I don't have to tell you about Black Saturday 2009. Temperatures of 47, 48 degrees, 3% relative humidity, storm force winds, pyroconvective storms, 173 people lost their lives. So that was a horror. And then the Blue Mountains in 2013, I put that in because there was no El Nino. So it was the biggest property loss. They were the biggest property loss fires in New South Wales history up to then. And there was no El Nino, and it was in October. We'd never lost, early October, we'd never lost lots of homes until late November onwards. So it was, oh my God, what's happening? After Black Saturday, we changed national doctrine. We brought in catastrophic, the new fire danger rating, and said, once it gets to that, that's off the scale. There's a scale of 1 to 100. I won't bore you, I haven't got time. How many minutes have I got? Oh my God. So once it's off the scale, you get everyone out of there because people will die and you can't fight the fires. And that's what we had on Black Saturday. So that changed our national doctrine. And then Black Summer. We knew it was coming. We didn't know when. Every state and territory burned. You might remember Gippsland, the Navy having to get people. Oh, what's the name of the town? Malakuta. I was fighting fires at Bateman's Bay on the south coast, was caught under a pyroconvective storm, and I didn't think it was coming home. And it was, I've seen a lot, been to a lot of fires, but I've never, nothing like that. Jo lives down there, and it was just a horror show. And if anyone tells you, we've had fires like that before, well, we haven't, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they're regurgitating stuff that would appear in a section of the press that I won't mention, the Murdoch press, him. So what's it doing? Extreme fire behaviour, pyroconvective storms, they were rare. My dad told me about seeing one in 1939 and the heatwave in 1939. I thought, yeah, sure. It was like the legend of the Yeti to firefighters. No one had ever seen one, but they were there. But in that Black Summer, we had about 60 in a 6-month period. 41 I think it was, and 60 in the preceding 40 years. So in a 6-month period. And what they do, they push up into the stratosphere because it's so hot, the convection, forms storm clouds, you get lightning starting new fires up to 30 kilometres away, you get 150 kilometre per hour winds, when you get downbursts and squalls from every direction, you can't fight fires. It's absolutely frightening. Fires are burning overnight, like they used to in the daytime. Because of the higher temperatures, you're not getting the moisture reuptake. And that's changed all our firefighting strategies, because we used to wait till the cooler, more moist conditions at night to backburn and lock fires in. But often we're still fighting running fires at night in the worst weather conditions. Not always, but on the worst days. And hazard reduction, our biggest tool to try to mitigate the risk is, when I was a kid, we used to burn for months in winter, and now we get a little bit either side of summer where we can still burn. I was involved with a hazard reduction burn on the northern beaches in Sydney in October. It rained the week before and we couldn't burn. A week later we lost it and had emergency warnings. We had hundreds of homes at risk and we lit it and we felt like crap, I can tell you. But what do you do? And this happened last week in Dalesford. So we're getting squeezed. I'm over time. Oh no. No. So, and look, what's happening, and this is, so climate change has sped up and the temperature's going up quicker than the scientists thought that it would. And there's a whole lot of discussion about that as it changes in sulphur being taken out of ships and in their fuel, and there's less blah, blah, blah. There's a whole lot of theories, but it's getting hotter quicker. And I looked at some research the other day that's not published yet, hasn't been peer reviewed, but it's frightening. And it's basically saying by 2040, black summer's going to be a fairly normal summer. By 2060, it'll be a cool one. So we've got worse on the way. It's happening worldwide. I worked in Los Angeles a few times over the years, and they don't get fires after early November. It rains, but it didn't rain this year, and it hasn't rained for the last few years. Oh, no, that's wrong. Sorry, before that, it actually rained more. But so they had Santa Ana winds, which are a certain type of wind, 18,000 homes in winter. And they just, we had Maui, we've just had major fires in Japan and South Korea that shouldn't. I've worked in Japan and I've been to South Korea and talked to firefighters. They just don't get the big fires, but they got them in the middle of winter. And it's about wind. So you've got a more energetic environment and the winds are getting stronger. And that's been measured. And that's driving incredible conflagrations. And remember Maui. Anyway, there's a whole lot. I could tick the box. And will it happen here? Probably. Now, it's not just fires. It's storms and floods, because for every 1 degree increase in temperature, the atmosphere holds 7% more moisture. And that means Insurance Council of Australia are right across this. They'll tell you that most rain now comes in violent downpours that overwhelms stormwater infrastructure and leads to flash flooding, and people die. And we had Lismore in 2022, 2 metres above the record flood height, which is unbelievable. And remember, the tinny flotilla had to rescue people. I'm winding up. And we just saw Tropical Cyclone Alfred. If that had hit those populated areas, it came a long way south. It has happened before in the 50s. But if that had not petered out into a tropical storm, it would have been disaster, because the homes around Brisbane, the Gold Coast, northern Tweed Heads, they're not built to cyclone standard. It would have just blown them apart, but we had a serious flood event. So, look, what's climate change doing here? You can go on the Climate Council's website and there's tools there. Temperature projections for this electorate with no action by 2090, 11 more days over 35 degrees Celsius. Existing action, what we're doing now, if we keep that trajectory, 5 more days over 35 degrees. And if we do what we need to do, which is net zero by 2035, that's what the science says, 3 more days over 35. So shows that if we do something, we can moderate it. Now, what's at risk here? There's a new report on the Climate Council website. Put in your postcode, it'll bring up your electorate. So no action, 12.2% of properties will be at high risk in the electorate. By 2100, that's 129 properties now to go out to 581 properties. Sorry, no, I've got the numbers wrong. Anyway, have a look, put in the postcode. So you can see if you take action, you can actually mitigate the effects of climate change. Now, what are the parties doing about it? I'm not going to be overtly political, but all you need is eyes and ears to see what's going on. So this is a scorecard for Labor, Liberal National Coalition, Labor and the Greens. Not for independents, but I have an independent Teal local member where I live. It was always Liberal, and the action that's happening locally is unbelievable because Liberals would do nothing for us because they had us, and Labor wouldn't put any effort in because they knew they wouldn't win it. And all of a sudden, everyone's knocking on the door wanting to do things. So it's, I sound like I'm campaigning for someone there. I'm not. It's just interesting watching politics. So there's a real record there with the coalition. They were climate deniers when I was trying to knock on their door in 2019 before the bushfire catastrophe, and I think they're worse now. I have to say that, and it's no wonder that you have candidates not turning up because I've been to a couple of things, and if you had a bit of an understanding of climate change but your bosses wouldn't let you talk about it, it'd be pretty embarrassing coming along because they've got nothing to say, I can tell you. What's their record on voting on climate? Nah. And my Teal independent, 9 out of 9. And then you can work on statistics. So there's a local campaign saying, oh, she votes 90% with the Greens. Well, you could say that red column votes 100% with Pauline Hanson's One Nation and Clive Palmer. But it's just silly saying that. But an individual candidates, we've seen with Bridget Archer in Tasmania, she represents her community and she sticks her neck out and she's really brave, and I've got enormous respect for her. So you can buck the trend if your community want you to. So that's my time. Why do I do what I do? Because I stick my neck up, and yeah, people take a bit of a poke at it occasionally, and someone wanted to assault me recently at a talk, which was quite interesting and embarrassing, but people get emotional about this stuff. Why do I do it? That's my grandson Eamon. That was my last day with Fire and Rescue New South Wales. Went back on the trucks. It was 6th of January 2017. He's got a little brother now. He's 11 now, and his little brother's 6. I'm not going to sit on my backside and do nothing when I know what's happening and I know that something can be done about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, and he'll be joining us on a panel discussion as well, so that's not the end from him. Now, I just also forgot to mention earlier that this is being recorded by Luke, but it's just on the speakers here on this stage. If you do ask a question, though, the audio of your question might be picked up by the camera. We do have a photographer here. Trinity, where are you? In the front. So if you don't want to have your photo taken for whatever reason, please just let Trinity know as well. Now, our next speaker is Jo Dodds, who came to climate advocacy after many years working in community and social services, including as a family counsellor. She worked as a journalist and a counsellor also with Bega Valley Shire Council. After experiencing the Tathra fire of March 2018 and then the Black Summer fires in 2019 and 2020, she has joined with other bushfire survivors to advocate for stronger climate action and help others raise their concerns for their communities, their homes and their livelihoods. She's the president and founding member of the Bushfire Survivors for Climate Action Group and works to change the conversation around climate and put people who are enduring the devastating impacts of climate-fueled bushfires at the front of the debate. Please welcome Jo Dodds. Thank you very much, Kirsten, and thank you everyone for turning out here tonight. A night where we've had a blessed little bit of rain, and I really hope for much more for this community, because having spent a bit of time in Halls Gap and Pomona over the last 2 days and seen how dry it is out there, and driven here from there. In the Bega Valley at the moment it's quite green, so we're very lucky to be in a very different situation to you, but I've never seen this country so dry. And I've lived a couple of years in Warrnambool back in the day. Was born in Donald, so that's my local credentials for you, but here from the Bega Valley. And I'm standing here at the moment just to introduce a couple of very short films that Bushfire Survivors for Climate Action has made, because we realised, some of us who'd been through the Tathra bushfire in 2018, we realised that even for those of us who'd lost, and I didn't lose my home, but for some of us who had lost our homes, even then, standing in the ashes of our homes, we were not being permitted to speak out about climate change. We were being pilloried and told that now was not the time, and, kind of shut down, like Greg was talking about. And at the same time, we realised that the reason we were being told to be quiet was because our stories were actually quite powerful. And it felt like a moment for us where we suddenly understood that when you've been through the sort of events that Greg's been talking about, and you've seen the kind of fires, when you've seen your community devastated like that, and the people around you have lost their homes, or you've lost your home, you know what you're talking about when it comes to bushfire and the impacts on your community. And those impacts go not just through the time where the flames are burning, but for the next 10 years, your community's still working through the many tasks and the recovery process. So we formed to talk about why those things were getting worse and more common, why fires were getting hotter and more dangerous, and that communities like ours, who experienced a fire in 2018, had another fire later in that same year in August. So in winter, we had 6 weeks of fire while there was snow on the mountains behind us. And of course, by the end of the next year, 2019, half of our shire was on fire, along with half of the east coast of Australia, and we lost 400 more homes in our shire. So we do a lot of storytelling about what that was like for us, and why we need politicians to start stepping up and talking about the impacts of climate, and talking about the need to reduce emissions. And along the way, we realised that the power of storytelling sometimes trumps the power of science and research, and that the messages that the scientists were giving us were not always clicking with the politicians, the decision makers, and we decided that we would tell our stories to cut through some of that politics. And so telling your story repeatedly can be very wearing, as you would know. And if you've been through a traumatic event, sometimes there is a pressure to tell your story a few times. After a while, it gets really hard to do that without a huge personal cost. So what we've done is produce a few, this is just 2 of the many films that we've made, very short, that talk about people's bushfire experiences, just to give you a sense of what it was like on the ground for those people. No images of fire, but we're very conscious that some of you may have your own personal bushfire or other traumatic experiences with weather or other things. So they're hard stories, but they're told in words, not with images of fire. So we'll have a look at those, and then I'll just have a brief chat after.
There were no aircraft available. There were just a few crews, some of whom had arrived there the previous day and still trying to work out where we were. That was in that incredibly stretched time in the Black Summer. We'd arrived at a small town called Wyndham, just a really small village, way down the south coast. We're all just off the plane from Queensland. And the local fire boss there said, all right, we're expecting a really hard night. There could be an ember attack on the village. Your job is to protect the fire brigade station and the school and the store. Protect houses if we could, but that was not a priority. Like if they burnt, they burnt. And I said, is everyone evacuated? What if some people are still there? And he just said in a very flat tone, that's their choice. And that to me, coming from Queensland, where we'd had a very, very bad fire season, but we were still fighting for every house in Queensland. It's like, oh, this is how bad it gets, just like, yeah, can't do everything. The Ember attack didn't come, so we had a fairly relaxed night, which was good. And on the last day, I was tired and I missed the fact that there's a very large tree which was burning out through its hollow. I'd noticed it, but didn't focus on it. There were a couple of guys in the truck, tree came down on it. You know, I got out of the road, thought that they might have been whacked. They turned out to be okay. But that was a moment. You know, I was kicking myself. I didn't pick that there was a large burning tree we should get out that could come down. Yeah, I had some issues after that mentally, which came up, you know, some weeks later. You know, seeing myself as mentally quite strong and healthy, and it's just like, oh, this is how it happens, you know. Long, tiring, exhausting, you know, period, both just in terms of the amount of time away from home, family, etc. And also just that incident, yeah, it can take a toll, yeah. I've had experience where, you know, I've nearly been killed or severely injured. I've had 2 friends die in 2009. Had friends who lost their houses in floods. I'd had a friend, a grazier, who was hospitalised with depression from severe drought. But of course, it's not just me. There's been literally, certainly tens of thousands of Australians, probably hundreds of thousands of Australians, who had a similar level of loss. The stuff that, you know, used to happen to some extent, and now it's just ratcheting up. It's just ratcheting up. The fire conditions have changed. What is causing this is that we have too much greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels up there in the air, and we've got to stop burning coal and gas and oil, and do it in a way that's fair and looks after people's interests. It's not about just stopping tomorrow, but we need to just get off it quickly because it kills people. We don't often talk about it that, you know, climate change kills people. It kills lots of people overseas, but it kills Australians. And Australia is a massive exporter of fossil fuel, coal and gas. And that kills Australians. Yes, we get some income from it, but that kills Australians, destroys their livelihoods, causes trauma for Australians and, of course, for people overseas. And we need to stop it.
The smoke sort of rolled in really quickly out of nowhere. The burnt leaves started falling. I was outside hosing and by then it had got dark. And then our neighbour called and said, "We're on fire, get out, get out." I ran downstairs to get the chickens and I felt like my feet didn't even touch the stairs. I felt like I just flew down the stairs, and in that time the fire was all of a sudden all around us. John was in front in his car and I was behind, and we went round a corner and it was just a wall of fire, like you couldn't see around it, and I just watched his car drive into it. And I stopped and I thought, do I put my foot down? Am I driving into hell? Or do I stay here? If I stay here, I will die. If I drive in, I may not. So I drove in. It wasn't for long, but it felt long. But that's the thing that John can't talk about, because he was on the other side and I didn't come through. Just pause for a minute. Yeah. So that was our Saturday, January the 4th, 2020. We tried to come to Bundanoon, but it was closed off. No one would tell us whether our house was there or not. And then we saw the news and saw the remnants of our home on the news. We didn't know what to do. We just didn't know what to do. There was a house in Moss Vale that someone was house sitting for 10 days. So we slept in 2 children's beds in a little room. And I just lay there thinking, this can't be my life. John, on the other hand, would go, good morning, and then go, guess what? And I go, what? What? And he'd go, we're one day closer to getting back home. He said that every day for a long time. It's funny, they say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I don't know if it does make you stronger, but it does open your eyes to what's important in life, your family, your community, and what can you do to help prevent someone else having to go through what we went through. Bushfire Survivors for Climate Action is really important to me, and I love the fact that they're not politically aligned. I love that it's about working with everyone across the board. The environment becomes a political football and it just gets passed around, and we lose sight of the things that we can do that aren't difficult to do, that can have a really positive impact. In Australia, we have so much sun, we have the wind, we have these things that we can use to keep our country going without having to dig holes in the ground, keeping our emissions at a level that is unacceptable. I think we have to stop and sometimes breathe and acknowledge that we are fortunate and we can make a difference. We just have to speak up.
So take a breath. They're pretty hard stories, aren't they? And I've seen them many times and they still touch me very deeply, and I think, a very close friend to both Barry and Donna, and so hearing their stories again and again and knowing at the same time that the trajectory we're on for more devastating bushfires remains catastrophic. We're still in the wrong direction. So can I get a round of applause for both those two and filmmaker? The filmmaker is Ellen Burbidge, and she's now one of our team and did a brilliant job and continues to do a brilliant job recording people's stories to share in places like this and with politicians. Like, it's a hard thing to watch those and then continue to say that you don't take this issue seriously. I know we're having a panel soon, so I might just leave my hellos at that for now and give a bit more space to the panel. So thank you very much for watching, and yeah, feel free to go and have a look on our website. You can see a whole range more stories if you're up for that. You might need a glass of wine to go with some of those, but the good thing is that by using those stories, we do create change in the world by holding the politicians to account. And we've got a few here tonight, and hope that they can take those stories with them to the battles that they have ahead of them, both in this election period and beyond. We are fiercely apolitical at Bushfire Survivors for the Climate Action. We don't care about the politics, we care about the policies. That's what we need, good, strong policies for a safer climate. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jo. We will get you back up on the table, not yet, on the stage, along with Greg Mullins, and also we'll welcome Cam Walker to our panel session. We know Jo and Greg, but quick bio about Cam. He lives in central Victoria and is an active volunteer firefighter with 2 brigades. He received the National Emergency Medal for his contribution to firefighting efforts during Black Summer. Cam is also a campaigns coordinator at Friends of the Earth Melbourne, through which he has campaigned for stronger government resourcing of volunteer and career firefighting for many years. Following Black Summer, Cam joined the Australian Firefighters Climate Alliance, which is a grassroots network of firefighters who want to see governments take stronger action on climate change. Please welcome our panellists to the stage. Just getting some microphones. Jo did promise me earlier that she would get the dancing started if needed, so I was right about the table. I knew it came into my head somewhere.
It wouldn't be the first time that I've danced on the table.
Now, I'm not sure, can we hear you very well in the mics? How are they going for people? Okay, I think Greg works. How are you going, Jo? Oh, a little bit. I think you might just have to hold it close. Yeah, lovely. Look, I was going to sit next to you, but might be easier if I just stand here and chat. So, first question. They've been written for me. I do like this. Look, we'll start with you, Jo, if I may. So you've just come here from Halls Gap and Pomona that you mentioned, and you spoke with people who you met through the summer Grampians fires. How is it for you to hear these stories like this? You know, how do people feel? What is the sense that you get from them?
Yeah, so we spoke to, I would say, 12 or 15 people in the last couple of days travelling through Halls Gap and Pomona and hearing many variations of people's experience, including, for instance, in Pomona, they lost 40 homes in their most recent fires. Halls Gap was impacted more by the loss of business during and after the fire incident. So there's stress in both communities for different reasons, but a lot of similarities with the sort of issues that people have to deal with post-fire. And as I alluded to before, it's not just while the fires are burning that people are under stress. That is one of the most stressful things you'll ever go through in your life, is that threat to your own personal safety and that of the people that you love, the threat to your safe place, your home, the place that is probably your major investment in life, to the property, to your stock, to your pets, to the place itself, the trees that you're familiar with. So much is at stake during that, and the fear that goes with that. But after the event, there's a series of other hits that just about everyone has to face once they've got through the bit where it's all on fire. And if you've lost property and you need to go to your insurance company, or you've still got a mortgage and you need to go to insurance company and your bank, you've got a couple more major fights on your hands. And people talked a lot about how difficult that process was. Even when the insurers were behaving pretty well, it's still incredibly complex. The bureaucracy that you've got to go through. My good friend and neighbour here tonight, Jan, also with Bushfire Survivors for Climate Action, lives at the other end of my road. And having told you today I wouldn't tell your story anymore, I'm going to speak for you and say Jan did lose her home in the Tathra fire. And she's told me, and her husband John's told me, so much about the complexity of things like losing all of your personal identity documents and how you go and prove who you are before you can even have another conversation with anyone else about, recovery and getting access to your super or your insurance or anything. So those stories happen again and again and again. And what we heard from the people in Halls Gap and Pomona, what I've heard from people in my own region in the Bega Valley, from up and down the coast, from Western Australia, from Kangaroo Island, is you're dealing with all of that. At the same time, you're hearing in the news all the time that the situation's getting worse. Emissions are still going up. We can expect more fires, and those fires will be worse than what you've already had. And what we've experienced in the Bega Valley was Tathra fire in 2018 in March. By August, we had the 6 weeks of the Yankees Gap fire. By the end of 2019, we were on fire again, and we lost Cobargo and Corma, and Bermagui was threatened, and people were being evacuated 8 times, 10 times in a row. When authorities or friends or anyone says to bushfire survivors, you just need to get back up on your feet, you need to be more resilient, you need to work on your recovery, and you say, how do you keep doing that? If you have one fire and then there's 30 years before the next one, maybe that's okay. But when you're having fire after fire after fire, and in between, I think we had 5 floods in the Bega Valley as well, destroying roads and bridges, not houses because we don't flood like that, but the impacts on people in that rolling, repeated thing are not something that communities can simply be more resilient for. So that was a theme that kept coming up, that what we need is not just the help to get through this fire. What we desperately need is the help not to have the next fire, not to have more coal and gas burning, knowing there are more emissions, knowing that we haven't turned that dreadful trajectory that Greg had on the slide that goes up there. We don't want that to visit our grandchildren and our children. We need that to come down so that we can just deal with life, which is hard enough at the best of times.
Cam, can I ask you, I guess as a follow-on to that, what's the feeling amongst firefighters? Because it's the firefighters again who are turning up again and again, and particularly the volunteer firefighters who live in these communities.
Before I answer that, can I just ask, I know there are other CFA vols in the room. Could you stick your hands up? Can we say thank you to them?
Yeah.
Because they're doing their work and they're going away from their families in order to support you. And maybe put your hand up again, if you don't mind. Just eyeball them and go and have a yarn, because all of us have these stories. It's really important to understand there's a couple of us here, but there's a plurality of stories that exist. So please go and have a yarn with them afterwards. I think in terms of where we're at, what Greg was saying about the Black Summer is kind of a benchmark that we need to be working on. And if you think about what happened that summer, we had a drying right along the eastern seaboard. I know my brigade in Central Victoria, my primary brigade, we sent people to Queensland in August. Then we were going to northern New South Wales. And then we had a code red day mid-November. I don't know if you remember that. It was about 42 degrees. I went to a fire at Mount Glasgow, and there were about 70 trucks on that from Apollo Bay and Anglesea, I believe it was, up to the other side of Bendigo. It was a phenomenal number of trucks. By mid-January, we had the evacuations at Mallacoota. And in my home brigade, I just remember at the start of the season, they say, who's up for what's called a way strike team? It might be a 5 or 7 day deployment. We filled that crew very quickly. Then New South Wales, we filled that very quickly. By the time we were getting to sending people to the the upper Murray in early January, we were almost done. We were exhausted. That season, we expected to go to the end of March, and thank God we got that rain in mid-February. But we were just done by mid-Feb. And basically, you know, I work for Environment Group. They're very generous. They let me work from home, and they encourage me to go, you know, nick off and fight fires. But people in my brigade were just, they'd run out of leave, and small business owners, they just couldn't afford any more time off. And I think that's the sort of seasons we've got to be preparing for. And Donna's story reminded me of something, which is, who here has been directly, personally impacted by a fire? A few people. And then the firefighters will know there's just something about fire time that is like another universe. Something weird happens to time and your memory of it. And I remember the day her house burnt down, January 4, 2020, I was at Dinner Plain up near Mount Hotham. We had a fire that was coming at us. We had a strike team from Northern Victoria and 3 local trucks. So we had 7 trucks to defend the village. Our mission, we'd set up around the fringes of the village. It's a beautiful alpine village if you've ever been there. We felt confident we could hold it. If we couldn't hold it outside the village, our job was to look after the public infrastructure, because you can't have a town unless you have sewerage and, water treatment and water supply, electricity, comms, community centre. If we couldn't hold that, we had a fallback point. Dinner Plain is in the middle of forest. There was no escape. So we'd set up collar tanks, which are like giant swimming pools that you fill with water. So when our tankers ran out of water, we'd still have supply for the crew protection. We felt we could hold that fire. Incident Command sent a plane over and they said, it is not possible to stop this fire. You will die if that fire comes into the village, and they demanded that we evacuate up to Mount Hotham. We had a half-hour argument with the incident controller and eventually had to accept the chain of command order, and we left. And we honestly believe we were driving out of there. The locals there were given 15 minutes to go and collect whatever was special in the house, and then we left. And it was just a miracle. There was a subtle wind shift that nudged the fire literally past the edges. It scorched houses at the edge of the village. So a miracle saved us that day. But that's the other reality. So the volunteers are exhausted. Many brigades are ageing and struggling to bring new people in. The fires are getting hotter. They're getting more intense. The following week, so that was January 4, the following Saturday, we were facing the same fire. It came back again. And by some miracle, there was a large air tanker that was flying from Wangaratta to Malakuta. Someone managed to divert it and they ran a perfect retardant line along the edge of the fire. We were able to go in and mop it up and stop it. So the other thing is investment, not only in people, but investment in equipment. And we rely on those large air tankers, and we don't own many of them. We have 2 in the country year round. So what we've got to do is keep investing in infrastructure that will allow us to fight these sort of fires. So Black Summer is going to become the norm, and then it will go beyond that unless we take meaningful action on climate change.
Thanks, Cam. So let's start talking about that kind of action now. Greg, we'll start with you. What priority actions would you like to see governments take, short term and long term?
Well, look, short term, we've got to adapt. So it's out of control. The horse is bolted, so we've got to harden communities. It's all about community resilience. So,
Just
can
closer.
you hear? Sorry.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Look, community resilience and preparation is essential because we're moving into a more dangerous future. So, and what I mean by that, Bateman's Bay, for example, on that New Year's Eve, where we just lost hundreds of homes. We ran out of water. That's happened to me many times, not just here, but in America. You just run out of water and you can't do anything more. That's soul destroying. But after that day, no drinking water, people couldn't flush their toilets, they couldn't have a shower, they didn't have electricity because all the power poles had gone down, so they had no refrigeration, they couldn't cook unless they had dirty gas. So lifelines, so setting up microgrids, solar microgrids. I think Cobargo, they've done something like that. So the community's just taken it in hand, but giving communities the ability to take action if their local brigade is sent somewhere else and they get another fire. So trying to think of where Peter Dunn lived. What's the name of the little village on South Coast? Sorry. No, he is now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Peter Dunn was a former commissioner of ACT, Emergency Service Authority. He's one of our people. Oh, can't hear. Louder. But they had no fire truck. They sent their fire truck away and the fire hit and it just took whatever it wanted and they had to jump in the ocean. And that happens so many times along the coast. So having basic capability for the local community to have their own firefighting equipment, pumps, hydrants, that sort of stuff, but the training. And we saw in Lismore with the floods, people said it's outrageous the SES didn't rescue people. Well, actually, it was fantastic because the community responded and so many lives were saved. So it was a triumph of human spirit and ingenuity. And people got out there and did what they needed to do. But the flood review after that said, let's train the community so they know how to do it safely, so that they're not going to drown or whatever when they're doing that sort of stuff. So that adaptation piece is essential. That's a short term. Long term, there's only one thing, and that's action. We've got to get off. And look, I had an interview about a year ago, and it was on ABC. I don't think it was with you, but they said, "What do you think about coal mines opening?" And I said, "It's a bit like saying, listen, I'm off the drugs, but I'm just going to sell them to my mates now." And so you can't have it both ways. And I'm not having a shot there. You saw the red crosses. There's very clear political choices. If you vote with climate in mind, it's a lay down misère. But there's still some things we need to work on.
Me for a second, can I please interrupt? I didn't think that this was going to be a political event. I thought it was going to be about actions and how to tell this community how to fight fires.
Fair
So
call.
you have some knowledge that we don't have fires in our summer. What are you going to do about that now? Can we do back burning, for instance?
Yeah.
These sorts of things.
Fair call, but I was asked long term, and long term we've got to take climate action, and countries around the world are not taking enough action, and that's if we keep pumping CO2 in the atmosphere.
Okay, thank you. We've heard your point, and Greg is replying
Look, I'm
to
happy
you.
to have
Thank
a
you.
talk to you afterwards, and I can understand why you'd get upset, and people think, there's an election on, people go, hang on, my team, whatever. Look, I understand that. And yes, but the trouble is, the biggest tool we have, which is hazard reduction burning, it's not called back burning. Back burning's another thing. We can't do it the way we used to because the weather conditions, it's either too wet or it's too hot and dry. And we saw what happened at Dalesford last week. That's happening continually. And volunteers like me end up going, you know what, I couldn't be bothered doing it because we just get a pile on Facebook. We try to do it and the fire gets away from us and we're the worst in the world. And so it's really, really difficult. But excuse
me, that is a bit of a cop-out because the fire brigade here is making it harder and harder for young people to try and get into the fire brigade to be a volunteer.
Okay, we want to have time for everyone, and I'm even pressed now with time to
I
even
have no idea
be
about
able
that,
to get questions. Can I pass the question on to you now, Jo? So, what action would you like to see in the short term and the long term? And I'll give you a minute to answer it, and I'll do the same for you, Cam, just because we're tight on the time.
Challenge accepted. Look, the only reason I've spent the last 7 years sweating blood on this issue, and this is not what I had planned for my life to be doing this, but it's because I have read the science and I believe the experts, and I know that the only way I, with a voice, can make my community even a little bit safer is to go and talk to politicians and decision makers about the one most important thing they can do to reduce future risk for all of us, not just from bushfire, but from heat, but from flood, but from drought. It's to reduce emissions. Now, there's a million little things we can do in place that may work or not work, but increasingly those things like hazard reduction burning are becoming harder and harder to do in the available window. And none of those things is going to solve the big problem that the ongoing increase in emissions is causing. So I want to see sensible policy, and that policy means shifting us from using fossil fuels to using more renewables. And we just drove here through the most incredible fields with the huge turbines turning. And I tell you what, I would rather see a turbine. I don't mind the people who don't want to see a turbine, that's fine, but I would rather see a turbine any day than a blazing fire coming towards me. And that's the alternatives that we're looking at now, is a grid that's already powered 43% by renewable energy. We only need to cover off the other
10 seconds. Come on,
7%. Yeah, numbers not my thing. Like, we're nearly halfway there. If we finish that, then we've done the very best thing that we can do in this country to make our kids' lives safer.
Here, here.
All right, Cam, your turn.
Trying to be quick. So we have career firefighters here. FFMV, Forest Fire Management Victoria, and we have volunteer firefighters. There's a couple of things we can do. FFMV firefighters are paid quite poorly compared with the work they do. They're currently undertaking protected industrial action in our state. So if you're down the street and you see FFMV firefighters in their green overalls, go and talk to them and ask them how you can support them in their current campaign to get better conditions. With volunteer firefighters, we need ways to increase diversity. There are often blockages. We heard that point about Colac. There are often blockages for people to join brigades. Sometimes the cultures aren't very friendly. We need to, if we are in brigades, to commit to make them safe and inclusive spaces so that everyone can feel comfortable signing up. Friends of the Earth since Black Summer has been talking about we need to establish a volunteer remote area firefighting team within the CFA. The other states all have them. We don't, which is crazy. And we reckon the way to do it is set it up so that people living in Melbourne can sign up. My home brigade, we have a 4-minute call-out time between getting the call on the pager and being on the truck. Most people don't live 4 or 8 or 12 minutes from a CFA station, but many people would like to contribute. So if you're interested in that concept, we need a little bit of money through the state budget, which will be handed down May 20th. We have support from the head of the CFA. We have support from the Emergency Services Minister. We have support from the head of FFMV. Now we just need a couple of $100,000 in the state budget to set it up to do a pilot and see if we can get more young people, diverse people from Melbourne able to be trained up and pre-deployed to work alongside our career firefighters in remote areas. And it's the remote areas, as we know, fires lit by lightning are often the ones that turn into major blazes that then impact our communities.
Cam Walker, thank you. Jo Dodds, thank you so much. Greg Mullins, thank you so much. I'd now like to invite our candidates for Wannon to come up to the stage. So we have Fiona McKenzie representing Labor, Alex Dyson, independent candidate, and Kate Gazzard from the Greens. Dan Tan from the Liberal Party is an apology. Now, we are short on time. You originally had a minute to introduce yourself. I'm going to give you 20 seconds. Yeah. Alex, who are you?
My name is Alex Dyson. I'm from Warrnambool, and it's my third time running as an independent candidate. And I guess I first learned about climate change in Mr. Ryan's class in grade 3, where we drew a world with an ozone layer and then another world with a smokestack and an ozone layer, and the second one got thicker. And it made sense to me then. At the same time, we learned about CFCs, which were causing a hole in the ozone layer. It's interesting how humans got together and fixed that problem. It started fixing, but the other one we've really kicked around. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk and listen to the great people here today.
Jan's got the timer ready. Good work. Fiona McKenzie from Labor, 20 seconds.
Okay. Hello, Fiona McKenzie, Labor. I live in Coorimundle. For those who don't know that, that's inland from the 12 Apostles. And I'd just like to personally thank the CFA, because on the 3rd of February, they saved my place. The fire went for 4 hours and I watched as the winds were swirling. It wasn't the first time something like that has happened. It also was a blaze in the Otways for nearly up to 2 weeks, just 14 kilometres away. So, yes, I've been packed and ready. I've got my little plan, and just to let you know, yes, I do feel the experience. So thank you.
And Kate Gazzard from the Greens.
Hi, I'm Kate Gazzard. I'm a paediatric doctor and mum of 2 young children whose future I'm really, really worried about. So that's why I'm running for climate action, for environmental protection. The concept bushfires are just so terrifying, and for all the survivors, which there are going to be more, my heart goes out to you.
Oh, nailed it. You're the only one who nailed the time. Well done, Kate. Now, just a reminder to make sure you keep those mics nice and close when you speak. So the way that this is going to work is we've got 3 questions. And I'll ask the question and I'll tell you who is going to answer it first. And you each have 2 minutes to respond. Jan, our timekeeper, you'll get the bell at 1:30, that's right. And then the 2 minute is, over and out. Sound good? Yeah, you get it's a warning bell at 1:30.
Maybe just give a wave at 1:30.
All right, maybe just a wave. A wave at 1:30 and a siren, no, just a bell at 2. Okay. So first up, we'll start with Kate this time. Okay. So tonight you've heard from 3 incredible speakers with some first-hand firefighting and surviving accounts. So as we go on and we know about the worsening outlook, how would you incorporate the latest forecasts, evidence, data from as well as data from bushfire survivors and firefighters into your policies?
I think it's pretty clear, no new coal or gas. We need to move away from fossil fuels. We need to transition to renewables and minimise the effects of climate change that are already, the trajectory is so alarming. We also need to mitigate against the effects of climate change. We know things are going to get worse. So we need to protect communities and a focus on health as well. I think we talk about the economy and what gas and oil brings to the economy, but what is the cost? It's just unimaginable. People losing their homes. The cost to community is so high that we can't afford not to do this. So no new coal or gas. We need to factor in a reconciliation with First Nations people and learn from their wisdom and management of the land, and more transition for First Nations people to start managing the land again. They have infinite wisdom about how to prevent fires with their history and connection to land. We need education and use of technology. So how do we make sure people are safe? We get alerts out to them. We can use new technology to forecast and see where the bushfires are coming from, and hopefully get alerts out so that we can have evacuations and avoid any mortality. And preparing the health system. So that's 10 seconds. So yeah, education and better resourcing for our firefighters who, predominantly are volunteers. We need support for them, both financial and psychological support.
Thanks, Kate. And Alex?
Yeah, I think it's about listening to community, to the experts, and taking them seriously. And it's been really incredible to be travelling around recently and hearing from the community members at the forefront of this. I was talking to the strike team leader of the CFA in Pomona, and the resources that they need in an acute sense when it comes to these things. A town that has been burnt out twice in a single year, they really need those kind of resources to be able to help their communities, because as we saw in the graphics before, such a large denomination of our firefighting resources are volunteers. So to be able to support them is absolutely crucial when it comes to fighting these things, as well as things that are simple, such as better communication in the regions. The amount of people who've talked to me and said when a fire starts, it's very it's usually in the bush, and it's very difficult to call someone and warn them that this is occurring. And so making sure that regional areas are equipped in the same way the city's equipped with these telecommunications services to make sure the word can get out. And it is what is the cost? It should be it should be less expensive to be able to put these in for regional people than it is for the cleanup or the trauma that it suffered when things get out of control. The comment of 2 planes in Australia for these things needs to be increased. As well as that, hearing new ways of using technology to help put into policy. Such as recently I had a conversation with someone on these particular mobile phone towers. You can put cameras which can, through AI, spot smoke coming out, discern it from stubble burns, and be able to respond really quickly. So it is exciting future, but the government really needs to get in there and help those community members, and not stick them with a fire levy if they work on a farm and volunteer, because that's bloody double damage.
Oh, made it. Fiona?
Well, yes, we are transitioning, and we're doing it as rapidly as we possibly can when it comes to moving into solar and to wind. There's now 4 million homes that have got solar panels, and of course that's been supported now with the call for batteries, because it's got to operate also on an individual level and then on a communal level and then on a bigger regional level. And certainly we're backing the sites. We're making sure that the CSIRO are there, that they're going to be contributing now, because it's all been affected with changes of land usage. So yes, certainly it's there. You can go throughout the Wannon region and you'll see the wind turbines. That's also helping the farmers survive. You know, at $40,000 a year for each turbine going up, that is important when you're bringing in 3 loads of hay and water per week into your farm. That is costing. So it's actually helping these renewables. And we want to go that one step further. A farmer said to me from down Timboon Way, yes, for producing milk, we need to continue using gas until we get the energy from the offshore wind turbines. And that's what we're advocating, because we put those into place and it will power up all of Australia. And it'll go further because it'll also power up manufacturing and jobs too. So the renewables can then act in a total loop. So that's the interest, because yes, environment and jobs. If we don't look at that aspect of jobs, then the environment will be more affected. So we're looking at both, but we need more than one term. We've done so much in one term and we need to continue.
Ooh, right. You've all nailed the buzzer, I think. Well done. This question, I suppose, in the context globally, you know, we've seen our Pacific Island neighbours affected by rising sea levels. Nationally, of course, bushfires, floods just in our region. Further north, we see cyclones. What climate impacts concern you the most? And then what priority actions would you advocate for or take if you are elected? And we'll start with you, Alex, this time.
It's a mixture, because obviously the images we've seen, those acute climate impacts of making these particular disasters worse, whether they be fire, whether they be flood, whether they be rising sea levels that you're talking about, our neighbours. But it's also the long-term effects as well, those ones that are more insidious sometimes when it comes to people. And we're just having a conversation here before about the lack of rain around the area at the moment and the way that farmers are struggling and having to bring in feed. And these sort of impacts, which are not as acute in a few of the examples that were given before, but are also extremely dangerous. And so all of them need to be taken extremely seriously by people. And yeah, it's interesting when you mention our neighbours to the north on the islands. The thing that pops to mind for me is the "time means nothing when there's water lapping at your door" sort of comment, which, yeah, for someone there's a billboard next to my primary school in Warrnambool calling me a dangerous joke at the moment, which is a bit weird. But to me, that's a dangerous joke, and it's not politicians taking the very real issues that are going to be facing not only our neighbours but ourselves, as we've seen and we've heard firsthand from people here, seriously. So it's about listening to these experts, listening to the locals, and making sure that we're not making decisions on a short-term election basis, but also making sure that's for the future as well.
Great. Well done. You can finish earlier than the 2 minutes too. Fiona, what climate impacts concern you the most, and what priority actions would you take locally, but also, if Labor was to win, what would you be advocating for from that federal government sense?
Okay, well, we're looking at a global economy, and I think it's really important that when we're dealing with our biggest trade partner, China, they're actually moving towards renewables, that they're already at their 5-year target of 65% renewables, and they're going to be there 100%. They're going for self-sufficiency. And in this world at the moment, that's what we all need to be thinking about, given the changing dynamics that's happening throughout the world. And so they're going for self-sufficiency. There's going to be the time when, I tend to think 5 to 10 years, no, they won't even be needing the coal anymore. There's talk about, yes, you've got to move out of coal and gas and so on. The fact is, in the next 5 years, selling coal to them is probable. The fact is, if we don't, they'll buy from Indonesia, and you can look it up, look at the science. It'll be 7 times dirtier in the emissions. We've got to really think that through. Okay, that is going to be worse than anything we've ever seen if that happens. We're moving out of the fossil fuels and we're transitioning out. So are other countries. The trade will stop. We all need to be self-sufficient. And that to me is very important. And it's very important that we also get into that made in Australia manufacturing as well. So there isn't that dependency.
Kate.
Thank you. I think personally I'm really distressed seeing the disappearance of our natural world. I'm most alarmed for my children and the future that they will inherit, and that they're likely to have worse health outcomes than our generation. So for me, my policies are no new coal and gas, a rapid transition to renewable energy, better investment in healthcare, including mental health into Medicare, so that we can support people. We need to be investing in the communities with batteries and solar and making power bills more affordable so we can also address the cost of living crisis. And we need to support the firefighters and everyone who's affected by the fires, of which there will be more and more people. So I think the key message is we need to get off fossil fuels, no new fossil fuel projects. From a healthcare point of view, I've seen burns patients, I've seen people with increasing respiratory disorders, all due to smoke, due to increased pollution. We need to get off fossil fuels. It's affecting our health, it's affecting our children's health, and it's not going to go away by a slow transition. We need to act fast.
Now, I'm going to go rogue a little bit, and because there's some great questions, and I didn't get time in the last panel to ask some of the questions, so thank you for the people who submitted them, and please find the previous panel and ask them directly, because we do have time to mingle and eat that wonderful food after this. This question came in. You'll be first, cab off the rank. We haven't started. Oh, who haven't we started? I've already forgotten. Who hasn't answered first? Fiona, you haven't answered first. Yes, you're going to answer this one first. What is your attitude towards renewable energy? How can the federal government or a federal government support increased rollout of local renewable energy to help communities stay connected to power during disasters?
Okay, well, not only are they actually putting out a policy to get batteries in your home, they're also putting in the community hub batteries. So if you go to Terang, for those who are not familiar, not so far away, they're putting in a very, very large battery that will help power not just their town, but more than that. So those batteries are going to have a rollout throughout the country, and that will certainly help, as well as, of course, the support for electric vehicles, more solar panels, and so on. So am I allowed to talk more? Or?
Oh, yeah, I think so. You got time?
So furthermore, as I said, they are with the renewable energy, we are looking at the offshore wind farms that will generate the energy that is required. And then we can just move right out of having the fossil fuels. So that's the importance of it.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go, Kate. Yeah, I suppose, how would you advocate for local renewable energies to help communities stay connected, particularly during disasters and with power?
Well, we have so much sun and so much wind that we need to, it's free and it doesn't make sense that we're not transitioning quicker to this. You can talk about gas, but actually most of our gas, at least 56%, gets exported overseas, and 1 in 3 gas corporations are paying no tax. So I don't see how that is actually contributing to the economy. We need to tax these corporations so that we can use the money for batteries, for making power affordable, so that we can connect communities and make sure that our communities are strong together, so we can fight climate change and we can fight the effects of climate change that we're seeing with bushfires, droughts, floods, all these natural disasters that are unprecedented, that we're seeing more and more.
Thank you. And Alex, local renewable energy.
Yeah, well, I'm really proud that over the last year, talking to community, that we've come up with the Independent Campaign for some local solutions through talking to people, and a man named Graham, who was really concerned about farmers' energy prices. And this is a great thing about taking a problem like climate change, but turning into an opportunity. And one of those things was energy for farmers, putting solar on roofs to make sure that they are able to reduce their energy costs, and with the dual benefit of bringing down emissions. I was out visiting a farm in Dixie, talking to a farmer about trying to get solar panels that can sit across the dam. That way you're getting power for your farm, you're able to run your bores, but you're also stopping the evaporation from there, where water is so crucial in this environment as well. So that's another good solution. And I was talking to a farmer just out of Hamilton as well, and he was saying when it comes to connectivity and making sure communities have this kind of power during emergencies it is more expensive to put transmission lines underground. But why don't we do it? Why can't we here in regional Australia be able to fork out for these things when a lot of money goes into the city when it comes to making things easier for the constituents there? But I think country people deserve these kind of things as well, which would have that dual benefit when it comes to emergency situations. And so, yeah, I'm really pushing for those kind of things and making sure it benefits locals, because whether it is, when there's a big energy project, the problem is it's still people selling you power. But if you're able to produce it yourself, that is something that's good for the people and the communities. And so that's a really good idea when it comes to the question at hand.
All right, well, to wrap it up, I want to challenge each of you to answer this, another rogue question of mine. I'm going to give you a minute each. Is that all right, Jan? You can work that out. Thank you. So a minute each, and we'll start with you, Alex, and we'll work our way back to talk about where you would like to see Australia, to cast your mind into the future. So our local community, but also Australia when it comes to bushfire preparedness. What would our world look like if you could make that happen? So in 1 minute, how would our world be different, Alex?
Well, I think that parts per million that Greg showed in his graph was coming down. I remember we tried to cap it at 350 at one point. I think it's got out of control, that on the way down. I think that quick response I was talking about when it comes to getting on top of fires or lightning strikes and those kind of things early to really help our volunteers get out there and make sure that people aren't impacted by these kind of things. And I really want to see an Australia in 30, 40, 50 years where the young generation looks us in the eye and said, what were you doing when this was going on? And we were able to say, we took it seriously and we did it for you. So thank you very much.
Fiona needs a microphone. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I was present at the opening of the new Beaufort Fire Centre just recently, and they have the state-of-the-art now centre and trucks, and the government was actually decide to finance it totally, and it was met with great applause in terms of that is helping then that community redirect that money into firefighting equipment, state-of-the-art firefighting equipment to protect them. And also, of course, education programs like we have in Timboon through the agricultural project, going in and talking to young people about volunteering. We have a huge volunteer group. You know, I'm part of Land Care and Field Naturalists and so on, and encouraging them to be involved. And of course, they are. They're there, they want to be involved, and that's what I would like to see, all involvement by everyone.
Thank you. And Kate, final word to you. 10 years from now, what's the vision when it comes to bushfire disaster readiness?
In 10 years, I want to see us off all coal and gas. I think we need to be proactive in investing in education and plans for people to evacuate early. We need to use technology and resource our CFAs and firefighters. And then from a reactive point of view, how do we, make sure that there's enough water? How do we make sure communications are getting to everyone to minimise any mortality, any deaths and loss of homes? And then responding to everyone, to the distress afterwards, so mental health support, treating people's medical problems, and smoke inhalation, burns, all of those things. So resourcing the health system so that we can address these.
Thank you. Can you please thank our Wannon candidates? Kate Gazzard, Fiona McKenzie and Alex Dyson. Thank you so much. Well done. And thank you for each answering that question without notice. This brings us to the end. I'm proud to say I'm 1 minute over time right now. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a fantastic event and it's not over yet. There's still plenty of time to chat, and please, if someone said something that you want to follow up with, ask them the question. Big thank you to the Colac-Otway Climate Action team. Fantastic job for organising this. To Greg Mullins, to Jo Dodds and Cam Walker for coming and sharing your thoughts and experiences. To Routley's Bakery, to keeping us fed. Beautifully done, thank you. And before we wrap up, I would again like to remind you to have a look around. Yes, greet those people you know, but maybe find someone you don't know and start up a conversation. This is a great group of people who are clearly very interested in what our future looks like and making sure we can be safe and happy well into the future. There are plenty of local groups to check out the stalls there. And just a reminder that this is not about being left, right, politically, whatever. It's about getting together as people who live in the bush and on the land. So meet someone new, chat about the event and continue the conversation. Thank you again for attending this event.